Welcome to this tutorial for how to manage the ends a little bit better and possibly take care of the way a bobble kind of opens up if that's displeasing you. So because we've held the yarn double, we don't just have two ends, we have three, or we have four. We want one of those ends. I often like to sew from the right. So I will hold the gnome like this and sew with my right hand. So I like to leave one of the left ones free, and then I weave in all the others. When I weave in the double end, I weave them together at the same time, so I don't weave them separately. So all I'm going to do is we're just going to thread that on the needle, and we're going to deal with them at the same time. Now, you do not have to jump through hoops and make this a really big, complicated thing. We basically just need to bury this end in a way that's going to stay secure. So what I would like to do, depending on the gnome, is I will just kind of go through under the garter bumps, making sure that I'm not accidentally going back down where the yarn comes out. If I came back through here, I would be undoing something there. So let's not do that. So I'm just going to go through these two, move myself away from the edge, and then have a better look at what's going on. All right, so I think what I may do is just kind of keep going under those garter bumps a few more times, pulling it. Make sure you don't distort it so that you're not shortening it when you do that. Now I'm going to go back this way. I'm going to go under the bump, but I'm going to sort of split the ply. I'm going to split the ply again from the threads or the yarn that I was weaving back, and just kind of go back a little bit. I like to go two directions when I'm weaving in yarn. Because then when it stretches one way, you've still got, if it gets pulled and it wants to stretch this way, there's still lots of stuff going the other way. So now we'll just cut that and let it just hang out there. Now we've got this one. Like I said, I'm going to keep one of them for sewing on the gnome later. You could theoretically leave both and sew them together, but I'm going to use this one to show you. So when we knit the 5-stitch bobble, one of the things that happens is because we are basically creating a little tab of stockinette fabric sort of out of nothing. We take one stitch, we make 5, we knit some stockinette, and we tack it down. Of course, there are sides to that tab, and depending on how your gnome is, it may open up and it may be a little different than you want it. So while weaving in this end, or if you think you like it and it turns out you don't at the end, you can always do it while you're sewing it onto the gnome. But there is just the possibility to kind of work the yarn across here and then just tack that down. So that's what I'm going to do now. So here's the back side. I am going to just split the plies here as I go through under these bumps. Splitting the plies is great because what happens there is the yarn, the plies are twisted, so when we go through them, they want to hold tight and kind of grab on. So splitting the plies is a great technique to use. Right, so we are here, roughly where the nose is. So now I'm going to come over and I'm going to look at it from the right side. Now, depending on what we do, the bobble often wants to lean in one direction or another, and so I'd like to center this. So I'm just going to kind of push it and play with it and see what it looks like. Then I'm going to come up. There is a little bit right there of one stitch that we had there. So I'm going to come up through that. Then I'm going to come through the nose that's sticking up. And one of the things when you're doing this is to make sure you're not grabbing any of these loops. We really want these loops to stay out of the process here. We don't want to accidentally tack them down. So then I've come up through there. I'm going to come back down, do it again, just to the side. And in another place, I would just right at the very edge of that bobble. I'm just going to go through a second time. And now if I tighten both of those, how's that looking? There is still time when we block to kind of play with it a little bit. So that's looking pretty good to me, but I think I want to sort of take this side and go that way just to kind of smooth that out. So I'm just going to go completely horizontally now. And the thing about toys and a lot of things in knitting in general is that there's a lot of room to convince things to be the way you want to, especially with wool and natural fabrics like or fibers like that. So that's my little bobble nose. Looks pretty reasonable. It's okay if it's a bit wonky, a bit wobbly, because gnomes are whimsical and we don't have to have things exactly perfect to make them look like a gnome. In fact, perfect doesn't really look much like a gnome at all. So I'm just going to go through this loop. No, I'm not. Why would I do that? That is silly. So it's a bit of mess of loops and things going on. So I'm just going to go back down into the wrong side of the nose fabric here, the beard. And then you've got a couple options. I think that the easiest and most direct one is simply to make a knot. So let's do that. Let's go through, we'll make a loop. Once we have that loop, we'll go through it twice. Once, twice. We'll snug it up and then we can cut it. One of the options we have is to actually cut it the same length as the loops that would be hanging here. If we like the look of it, we can leave it. And if we don't, we can always thread it on the needle and kind of push it up into the sides here of the, I guess we could even call that the mustache, couldn't we? But I'm just going to just trim that roughly the same length as those loops. See what we think of that and make that decision when we're done nutmeg. So that is the tutorial for how to sew in the ends and how to tidy up that open bobble, if that is something you would like to do. If you'd like your nose to be a little rounder, I encourage you to spritz it and just ever so lightly spritz it and then just kind of play with it and get it the way you want. Wool is very amenable to blocking and being told what to do. I hope this tutorial helped you. Happy knitting and happy gnoming.